Hey guys, Karenology here. Get ready because this story is pure chaos from start to finish. They came with a bulldozer. Not a letter. Not a call. Not a knock on the door. A damn bulldozer. I was sitting on my porch with my first cup of coffee, watching the fog lift off the back field, when I heard that low rumble. Thought it was a truck passing. But it didn't pass. It growled closer and louder until the whole porch began to tremble under my boots. That's when I saw it. Bright yellow, rolling right through my front gate like it belonged there. Behind it came two black SUVs, clean and smug, like the folks inside had been planning this ambush for weeks. Out stepped Karen, of course, chairwoman of the local Homeowner Association. Her heels clicked against the gravel like a judge walking to a hanging. She wore her signature pink suit and a laminated badge swinging from her neck like some holy relic. Her lips were pursed so tight you could have used them to cut wire. Benjamin Ross, she called out, reading my name like it was a verdict. You are in violation of Section 13C of the Zoning Covenant. This land has been reclaimed by the Association for Communal Development. Effective immediately. I didn't move. Just let the coffee sit on my knee, steaming. I knew better than to speak first. The first word always costs you. I don't recall signing over a damn inch, I finally said. My voice came out calm, but my fingers curled around the cup hard enough to crack the ceramic. The original property agreement stipulates temporary permissions granted by prior oversight, she replied, gesturing to a clipboard held by a stone-faced man in sunglasses. It's all here. You had no permanent rights to that southern acre. And now it's being used for a public parking initiative. That southern acre was my horse field. I stood, slowly, not out of weakness, just to let her know I wasn't about to scramble. I'd been here 22 years, buried my dog under the oak near the fence line, taught my son to ride on that field, watched my wife walk out to the pasture every evening just to feel the breeze after chemo turned her hair to wisps. You think you can just show up with your paper army and carve up my life? I said. That field feeds what's left of me. Karen tilted her head like she was dealing with a confused child. Mr. Ross, your sentimental attachments are noted, but irrelevant. The decision is final. That's when the bulldozer rolled forward, flattening my front sign that said, Private property, keep out. I didn't shout, didn't swing, just turned and went inside. I sat at the kitchen table while the engine hummed outside, tearing into the dirt. My hand shook when I reached for the landline. Not from fear, from a strange burning clarity. The kind that only shows up when someone tries to take what's yours with a smile. I called one man, Freddie. Haven't spoken to him in 15 years. Not since the carnival burned down and he disappeared into the desert with a bag full of fireworks and a smile too big for one town. He picked up on the third ring. Well, I'll be damned. If it ain't Big Ben, what's burning? Not yet, I said, but they're trying. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. Give me 2 days, Freddie said, and a reason to load the van. You'll have both. When I hung up, the bulldozer had already torn a 10-foot scar through the field. The battle for my land had begun, and I wasn't planning on fighting it by their rules. I just needed to remember who I used to be before grief softened my edges, and how to sharpen them again. 2 days later, The sun crawled up over the ridge just like it always did. But nothing about that morning felt normal. The field was still bleeding dirt. The southern acre now crisscrossed with tire marks and caution tape. The smell of diesel had soaked into the soil like a bad memory. I stood at the edge of the pasture with my arms crossed, watching two men in vests argue over blueprints propped against the hood of a van. One of them looked over and pointed, said something I couldn't hear, then laughed. That's when I saw her again. Karen, standing beneath a paw parapluie tent chart. Table full of pamphlets about community engagement through shared infrastructure. I didn't walk over. I didn't have to. She turned her head and caught my eye like she'd been waiting for it. Raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. She wanted me to break. Wanted me to shout, protest, swing. Something she could use against me. Instead, I walked back inside and waited. Freddie's van arrived just before noon. If you could call it a van. More like a rusted spaceship on wheels, covered in stickers from failed bands and dead circuses. He parked sideways like he was trying to insult the gravel. When he stepped out, he looked exactly the same. Long silver ponytail, goggles on his forehead, leather vest over a Hawaiian shirt. A mix of genius and bar brawler. Still got that bull's head nailed to your barn door? He asked, grinning. Still got your bourbon buried under my porch? I shot back. We shook hands like men who'd survived something. Maybe we had. I led him inside, past the ticking clock and the cold fireplace. He scanned the place with a low whistle. This house got ghosts. Just one. She was kinder than I deserved. He nodded, didn't press. I spread out the documents. Property lines, old utility maps, photos from the 90s, when the land was still called Ross Hollow, and the Homeowner Association didn't exist yet. Freddie leaned over them like a man reading battlefield terrain. What's your angle? He asked. They think they own the field, but they forgot they're plugged into my grid. I showed him the paperwork. 20-year-old lease granting the HOA exclusive use of a power switchboard, tucked behind my shed. I'd ignored it for years. They'd forgotten it existed, but it still sat on my land. And without it, their little community development was a ghost town. Freddie whistled again. You're sitting on a kill switch. Not yet, I said, but I'm about to be. We spent the rest of the day wiring, measuring, diagramming. Freddie had ideas. Big, strange, probably illegal ones. But I reined him in. I didn't want an explosion. I wanted silence. Darkness. Just long enough to make them blink. By sunset, we had a plan. And a timer. Karen passed by in her Lexus just as Freddie was packing up. She slowed down. Window halfway down. Afternoon, gentlemen. Lovely day for renovation. Freddie smiled like a fox with feathers in his teeth. Hope your lights stay on tonight. She narrowed her eyes, and I saw it. The momentary flicker of uncertainty. Good. Let her feel it. That night, the grid went down. At exactly 8:17 p.m., the southern acre plunged into black. The construction halted. The tent collapsed. The pamphlets blew into the wind like autumn leaves, with nowhere to land. I sat on my porch and sipped from an old flask. Freddie lit a cigar and raised it like a torch. No alarms. No sirens. Just silence. Just darkness. It wasn't revenge. It was the first reminder I was still here, and I wasn't going anywhere. The blackout only lasted 3 hours, but it caused enough chaos to shake the polished teeth of the Homeowner Association's machine. The next morning, Karen was back with a generator, a phone glued to her ear, barking orders like a stranded general. They had floodlights now, humming in angry defiance, but they looked out of place, like plastic flowers in a battlefield. I didn't gloat. I didn't have time to, because that little maneuver put a target on my back, and I knew it. The HOA wasn't going to roll over just because their extension cord got yanked. Sure enough, that afternoon, a white pickup rolled onto my drive. No logos, no plates. 2 men stepped out, one in a maintenance jumpsuit, the other in a suit so stiff it looked like it had been ironed with concrete. The second man held a briefcase and a clipboard. I already hated him. Mr. Ross, he began, we're here to perform a compliance inspection on behalf of the Community Oversight Subcommittee. I looked at the clipboard, then at him. Never heard of it, Anstatzer. It was ratified under the Emergency Infrastructure Adjustment vote last quarter. You were notified. No, I wasn't. He smiled the way snakes do, just before they strike. Then I suppose that's your first violation. They moved fast, started measuring my porch, photographing my barn, tapping my fence posts like inspectors in an old western. I followed them, arms crossed, silent. My silence was a weapon now. I wasn't going to give them a soundbite. Then the man in the jumpsuit walked around the back of the house. A few seconds later, he whistled. Loud. The suit came running. I followed. They stood in front of the power switchboard. The one behind the shed. The one I just used to kill their lights. Is this yours? The suit asked, trying to sound casual. I nodded. Sits on my land. Wired into my meter. According to our records, it's part of the community grid. Unauthorized modifications could constitute tampering with public infrastructure. He looked pleased with himself, like he'd found a loaded pistol in my glove box. I stepped closer, close enough to see the sweat starting to bead under his collar. According to county records, I said, that box was leased to the association under a limited use agreement that expired in 2011. Which makes it abandoned equipment. And abandoned equipment on private property is mine to do with as I please. He blinked. That one hadn't been on his cue cards. Don't worry, I added. I can email you a copy. I'll even highlight the clause in red so you don't get confused. Freddie chuckled from the porch, loudly. The suit muttered something about pending review and stomped back to his truck. They peeled out fast, like they thought I might chase them with a pitchfork. But it wasn't over. Not even close. That night, I found my mailbox smashed to hell. Post bent sideways like a snapped leg. No tire tracks. No witnesses. Just a warning. Their kind of warning. I took it without a word. Cleaned it up. Welded a new one from scrap metal and bolted it into concrete. Let them try again. Freddie watched me work. Arms folded. You sure this ain't gonna burn you down? I'm counting on it, I said. Fires flush out the rats. Next morning, my neighbor, Cole, showed up. He hadn't spoken to me since the first bulldozer incident. He was always polite but distant. Liked his yard trimmed, his gutters clean, his life HOA approved. He stood on the edge of my drive like he was testing the ground for landmines. Ben, he said, voice low. They're digging behind the pasture. Looks like a trench. Deep one, I nodded. Appreciate the heads up. He hesitated, then added, just watch your back. What? And that was when I knew. They weren't just trying to evict me. They were trying to erase me. That trench wasn't just a ditch. It was a message. The next morning, I drove out there with a thermos and a folding chair. Sat right on the edge of it, legs dangling over the freshly turned earth, like I was waiting for ghosts to rise up and explain themselves. They were digging too close, too deep, like they were trying to run utilities straight through fruits on my pasture and call it progress. 3 men in hard hats avoided my eyes. One of them had the decency to nod. The others just kept their heads down, shovels biting into the dirt like it owed them money. I didn't say a word. Just poured coffee, watched, waited. After half an hour, Karen showed up in a golf cart, dressed like she was headed to a ribbon cutting. Red blazer, white slacks, pearls gleaming like shark teeth. She climbed out, didn't even look at me. Aye, Charles. You're trespassing on association worksite property, she said. I raised my cup. Funny. Thought this was my ranch. This section falls under communal jurisdiction now. Easement reclassification was approved last week. You mean when you called a vote without informing the owners? That kind of approval? She smiled thin. It's within our authority. Sure, I said. If your authority includes burying pipes in a man's soul, she didn't like that. Her eyes flickered, jaw tightened. But she turned and walked away, heels crunching the gravel. That night, Freddie and I climbed onto the barn roof with a flashlight and a bottle of rye. We looked down at the trench lit by floodlights, heard the buzz of equipment still humming at midnight. Asti, they're not just pushing, he said. They're provoking. They want me to swing first, I said, so they can finish what they started. You thinking what I'm thinking? I'm thinking it's time we give them a show. The next morning, I made calls. Dug into a few dusty contacts from a life I hadn't visited in decades. Old engineers, county clerks, one retired surveyor who still owed me for pulling him out of a frozen ditch in '92. Turns out that communal jurisdiction had a leak. The easement they were banking on? It wasn't finalized. The state database still listed the land as under private review, which meant they'd jumped the gun. And better yet, any damage done before confirmation was the responsibility of the party performing the work. I printed it all, filed copies, sent registered notices, but I didn't deliver them to Karen. I posted them on wooden boards, big ones, right next to the trench, with arrows and quotes from state law. I used paint so bright you could see it from the highway. Then I sat back and watched. By noon, a county inspector showed up. Clipboard, camera, frown deep enough to plant crops in. He wasn't HOA. He was real. And he was pissed, Karen argued. Flapped papers. Waved her arms. But the inspector kept pointing at my boards like they were gospel. That night, the trench lights went dark. The machine stood silent. For the first time in a week, the pasture was quiet. Freddie grinned like a man watching a bear trip over its own paw. You gonna let up? He asked. I shook my head. They came here to draw lines in my dirt. I'm just showing them where they really are. But inside, I felt it. The weight. The old ache behind my ribs. Because this wasn't just land. It was memory. It was grief. It was all I had left of a life that cancer didn't get to finish. And I knew this war wasn't even halfway done. They were regrouping. And next time, they wouldn't bring shovels. They'd bring lawyers. They came in suits this time. 4 of them. No vests, no tools, no mud on their shoes. Just clipboards, briefcases, and the kind of smug that came with knowing they'd never had to fight for anything with their hands. I watched from my porch as they stepped out of a silver SUV and strutted toward my gate like they were heading into a boardroom, not a ranch. Karen wasn't with them. That told me she was either scared or smart enough to let someone else get blood on their heels. One of them held out a thick envelope. "Mr. Ross," he said, "you've been served." I didn't take it. Just stared at the hand like it held a dead rat. He laid the envelope on the porch rail. "You're being issued a cease and desist for obstruction of association development, tampering with designated infrastructure, and slander through public signage." "Slander?" I asked. I quoted the law. "That may be true," he said, lips twitching, "but tone matters." Freddie appeared behind me, holding a wrench like it was a baby. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he said. "You here to sue us for breathing next?" No one laughed. They handed over papers, photographed the front of the house, and left without another word. As soon as the SUV disappeared past the cattle gate, I opened the envelope. 56 pages. Legal jargon so thick it might as well have been written in Greek. Freddie whistled. "You gonna read all that?" "Eventually." But the words didn't scare me. What did was the strategy. They weren't fighting me with shovels or boards anymore. They were drowning me in ink, trying to exhaust me, slow me down, bleed me out with bureaucracy. I spent the next 2 days calling every local lawyer I could find. Most wouldn't touch it. Too messy, too political. One finally agreed to meet. Margaret Cruz, retired but sharp, with a voice like a buzzsaw, and eyes that didn't blink unless they wanted to. She sat across from me at her kitchen table, reading the cease and desist like it was a grocery list. "They're bluffing," she said finally. "Most of this wouldn't hold in traffic court, but they're not trying to win. They're trying to tire you out." I nodded. "It's working." She looked up. "You want to settle?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about the field, about the nights on the porch with my wife, her head on my shoulder, whispering about painting the barn a stupid shade of blue she loved. I thought about the dog buried out back, the tree we planted when our son turned 10. "No," I said. "I want to finish this." Margaret smiled. "Then I'll draft a counter. But you better be ready. They're not letting this go without taking something from you." They already have," I said. By the time I got home, Freddie had installed 2 cameras, one on the fence, one above the shed. He was painting something on plywood, a new sign. I squinted at it. "You misspelled jurisdiction." "No, I didn't," he said. "It's in protest." That night, the wind kicked up, howling across the open pasture. Something about it felt off. I sat up late, listening, waiting. Then, just past midnight, I heard it. A crunch, like gravel under tires. I grabbed my boots, my flashlight, and stepped outside. At the edge of the field, near the trench, I saw movement. 2 figures, One crouched, doing something with wires. The other keeping lookout. Trespassers. I didn't shout. Didn't run. I just walked, slow, steady, light off, until I was close enough to see faces. They weren't workers, not contractors. These were hired hands, and they were trying to bury something. Literally. I took one more step and stepped on a twig. A loud one. They bolted. Vanished into the dark before I could blink. I shined the flashlight on the hole they left open. Inside, a sealed black box, wires, a timer. Freddie appeared behind me, breath short, wrench still in hand. What the hell is that?" he asked. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure whether it was a power node, a sabotage device, or a warning. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat on the porch with a shotgun across my lap and a thermos that never seemed to empty. The box was still there, half buried and buzzing faintly, like a wasp trapped under glass. Freddie and I hadn't touched it. Not yet. We were reckless, but not stupid. At dawn, we drove it out to the old grain shed. Locked it inside with a chain and a warning sign so bright it could blind a deer. I didn't know what kind of tech it was, but it had a timer, and that was enough. Freddie said it looked military grade. I didn't ask how he knew. That morning, I called the sheriff's office. Gave a vague report. Trespassers, suspicious equipment, request for a deputy. They promised someone by noon. No one came. By sunset, Freddie started pacing. "They're testing us," he muttered. "Seeing how far they can go before you blink, me." "I don't blink." Yeah, but I do," he snapped. "And I ain't got skin in this like you." That hit harder than I expected. Because he did have skin in it. He'd been pulling wires, risking charges, standing in the trench with me, and still, he wasn't family. This wasn't his land. I poured us both a drink, sat him down. "You want out?" I asked. He looked at the bottle for a long moment, then shook his head. "Nah, just want to know we're not going to wake up in a crater." The next morning, I drove to the county office myself. Demanded a sit-down with whoever was signing off on Homeowner Association expansions. After enough shouting to get a janitor's attention, I finally ended up in a fluorescent-lit room with a man named Davis, mid-40s, pinstripe tie, handshake like a dead fish. He barely looked up from his screen. The association has presented all their permits in order. You'll need to file a formal complaint if you suspect irregularities. I found unauthorized tech buried on my property. Then call the police." I did. They didn't come. He clicked his pen, slowly, deliberately. Mr. Ross, I'm not authorized to pursue criminal matters. I handle land use, not hardware disputes." I leaned forward. "You signed the expansion permit, right?" "Yes, our..." He stiffened. "I process filings, not enforce them. So if someone used your name to push an illegal easement, you'd just shrug?" He didn't answer. Just stood, walked to the door, and opened it. "Have a good day, Mr. Ross." On the way out, I noticed a familiar logo on a pamphlet at the reception desk, one of Karen's community flyers. And at the bottom, "This project made possible in partnership with the County Growth Alliance." She had friends in every corner. I drove home with my knuckles white on the wheel. When I got there, the shed was open. Lock cut, chain lying in the grass like a shed snake skin. The box was gone. Freddie came running from the barn, eyes wild. I went to get a tool. 10 minutes max. It's just gone, Ben. We searched the perimeter. Checked cameras. One had been smashed. The other caught a glimpse of a gray SUV with blacked-out windows. No plates. I stared at the shed, at the cut lock, and I realized something. They weren't just trying to push me out. They were cleaning up, destroying evidence. And that meant whatever had been in that box wasn't just a message. It was leverage, and I just lost it. Losing that box felt like losing ground in a war where every inch mattered. I didn't know what they'd done with it, but I knew it had changed the game. They were operating in the dark now, pulling strings I couldn't even see, and that made them dangerous. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. No trucks, no trench work, no HOA patrols playing sheriff. Karen was nowhere to be seen. But that didn't bring me peace. It made my skin crawl. Freddie started locking every door twice. I found myself checking the fence line at midnight, like a man waiting for a siege. We weren't just defending a property anymore. We were defending the truth. And the truth had teeth. Then the letter came. Plain envelope. No return address. Left on my porch like a snake coiled on a welcome mat. Inside was a single page. Printed. Clean. If you continue to interfere, the next box won't have a timer. It'll have a trigger. Freddie stared at it, then looked at me. You think they're bluffing? I think they're desperate. He took off his goggles, rubbed his face. This is way past HOA disputes, man. This is something else. I nodded. And we're the only ones standing in it. I scanned every inch of my property that day, measured every new track in the dirt, set up 4 new trail cams, upgraded the locks, sent copies of the letter to Margaret Cruz, and 3 other people I trusted from the old days. One of them, Jack Merton, used to work in private security. I hadn't spoken to him since 2008. He called me that night. What the hell have you stepped into, Ben? Something dirty, I said. And something scared. Want me to come down? Not yet. But his voice gave me something I didn't realize I'd been missing. Backup. I told Freddie we were going on the offensive. No more playing defense, I said. They want to hide something? Fine. Let's shine a damn spotlight on it. We built it in the barn. Old junkyard lights. Industrial wiring. A salvaged fog machine from Freddie's carnival days. At nightfall, we set it all up at the trench site. Motion triggered, with full flood. At 2:13 a.m., the lights kicked on and caught them. 2 figures. One with a shovel. One with a case. They froze in the beam like raccoons in headlights, then bolted. But we were ready. Freddie had set spikes along the east fence. Their truck didn't make it 10 feet before the front tire blew out. We caught up before they could run. They weren't HOA. Or if they were, they weren't dressed for a board meeting. One man had a scar across his jaw. The other had a limp that said old injury, maybe military. Both looked like they hadn't expected resistance. I didn't ask questions. I just stood there, shotgun in hand, and stared until they climbed into the back of their ruined truck and said nothing. Just silence. Like ghosts. They left the case behind. Freddie picked it up. Locked. We brought it into the barn, set it on the workbench. It was heavy, industrial, not a contractor's case. This was something else. I ran my fingers along the edge. Let's find out what they didn't want us to see. Why, Freddie cracked his knuckles. Tomorrow. We do this with daylight. I looked at the case one last time before we turned off the lights, and I knew whatever was inside was going to change everything. Because if it didn't, lines, they wouldn't have come for it, with threats and men who didn't speak. We opened the case just after sunrise. It wasn't easy. Triple latch, steel corners, some kind of biometric lock that Freddie bypassed with a trick he refused to explain. Inside, padded with foam, were 3 objects: a tablet, a small drone, and a manila folder sealed with red tape. The tablet booted up to a login screen. Freddie handled that too. Turns out carnival work teaches you a lot about systems. Or maybe he just had more skeletons in his closet than I thought. Either way, 5 minutes later, we were looking at a screen full of documents, maps, financial reports, email threads, all stamped with the Homeowner Association's logo. And another logo I didn't recognize. CGA, County Growth Alliance. The same name I'd seen on the pamphlet at the zoning office. The documents told a story, one they never meant for anyone to read. Turns out, the trench wasn't just for utilities. It was for piping runoff, chemical runoff, from a facility 2 towns over. A processing plant that had been fined 5 times in the last decade for toxic dumping. Instead of paying to reroute their waste legally, they'd partnered with the CGA to funnel it beneath our neighborhood. Quietly, discreetly, and my pasture was the linchpin. The Southern Acre wasn't about parking. It was about proximity. They needed that land to run the final segment, and I was the last holdout. They'd already signed off on payments. Bribes masked as community grants. Karen's name was on at least 2 memos approving expedited negotiations. Freddie sat back, blinking. They're building a damn poison vein under your land. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Because all the rage I'd felt, all the stubborn fire, it suddenly had a target. Not just bureaucracy, not just greed, but something filthier, something that hurt people. I opened the folder. Inside, a printed photo of my property with the trench route drawn in red, and a note paper-clipped to it. Ross problem must be neutralized before Phase 3. Neutralized. Freddie looked at me. That's not metaphor. That's a threat. I nodded. Which means we've got them scared. We spent the rest of the day copying everything. Digitally, physically. Stored backups on 2 drives. Mailed one to Margaret Cruz with no return address. The other I put in a coffee can and buried behind the barn. Freddie laughed. Called it overkill. Paranoia's not crazy when they really are out to get you, I told him. At dusk, I drove into town. Bought a burner phone. Called Jack Merton. Gave him coordinates to the coffee can, just in case. Ben, he said, what's your end game? I'm going to light a fire, I said, and make sure they're standing in the smoke, back home. Freddie was in the barn testing the drone. It was small but powerful. High-res camera, long battery life, remote access. A scout, a witness. We programmed it to patrol the trench site, set alerts, gave it a name, Vigil. That night, just past midnight, the drone pinged. 3 figures. No lights. Working fast. One of them had a tank. I watched from the porch, jaw clenched. Freddie handed me the controller. You want to scare him? He asked. No, I said. I want to catch him. I pressed record. and watched as they sprayed something dark into the open trench. When the drone zoomed in, we saw the label: industrial runoff, hazardous. I didn't feel fear. Not anymore. I felt purpose. They weren't just trying to erase me. They were trying to bury poison beneath this town and call it progress. And I had proof. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear. Those days were gone. But because the plan wouldn't let me. It sat in my head, fully formed, clicking together like the final pieces of a rifle bolt. Precise, loud, unstoppable. At dawn, I cleaned up, pressed my old denim shirt, shaved, not for them, for her, for the woman who used to sit on this porch with her tea and tell me I could win any fight if I stayed patient enough. I kissed the old wedding ring still hanging on the back door nail and stepped out into the morning like a man walking into a gunfight with a full heart. Freddie was already up, tuning the drone and prepping the generator. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Everything was ready. At noon sharp, the Homeowner Association held their quarterly meeting on the freshly paved lot they stole from me. White tents, folding chairs, a podium. Karen at the center in another one of her suits, this time green, maybe thinking it made her look wholesome. The county reps were there. A few neighbors. Cameras, small and controlled, managed by their people. They didn't know I had mine. Freddie flew the drone high, out of sight, streaming live to 3 servers. But that was just part 1. I walked straight through the gathering, like I was still the landowner. Which I was. I stepped up onto the stage as Karen's mouth opened, in that polished, polite protest I'd come to despise. Mr. Ross, this is... I held up a flash drive. This is a copy of every document you never wanted anyone to see. The projector behind them clicked on. Freddie, from the hilltop, ran the feed. The screen lit up. Maps. Emails. The note. Ross problem must be neutralized before Phase 3. And then drone footage. The trench. The barrels. The spraying. Labels visible. Faces shadowed, but movement unmistakable. The crowd went still. Karen tried to speak. I kept going. I know what. This wasn't about zoning, or beautification, or community development. This was about burying toxic runoff under our homes, under our kids' playgrounds, and hoping nobody asked why the grass was dying. People stood. Some whispered. One man from the county took out his phone. Another walked away fast, phone already to his ear. Karen turned to the projector, then to me. You're trespassing. I smiled. You're poisoning. She lunged for the podium, maybe to kill the feed, but she wasn't fast enough. Freddie had set it up wirelessly. 3 redundant systems. 1 went dark. 2 kept going. I looked her in the eye. I won't sue you, I said. I won't file complaints or attend your rigged hearings. I'll just let the state environmental agency sort through what I've already uploaded to their server, along with 30,000 people watching this right now. Her face crumbled, not into fear, into fury. You think this ends it? She hissed. No, I said. I think this ends you. And I stepped off the stage. I walked past the crowd. Slow, steady. No one stopped me. One woman nodded. Another took my hand. My neighbor, Cole, stood near the back, pale, stunned. He didn't speak, but he didn't look away. Back home, Freddie cracked open a beer and handed me one. I didn't drink it. Just sat down on the porch, same chair, same view. The trench in the distance looked smaller now. Powerless. In the following weeks, the permits were pulled. Investigations launched. Karen disappeared from public life. The County Growth Alliance scrubbed its website. No medals, no apologies. But I didn't want any. The land was mine again, and more importantly, so was the silence. Not the kind that follows defeat. The kind you earn. The kind you defend. The kind you live to keep.